So, just to review, it's March 27th, and we have a budget information session. And tonight, included in the budget update will be instructional, administration, business office, and benefits. So I'll turn it over to the district team to make their presentation. And thank you all for coming out.
Thank you, Mr. Thank you, Mr. Conklin. I figured out how to use the deck. That's very good, Bill. Just push a button and make it turn blue. Do we have the presentation up on the screen? Mrs. Wheeling, I would probably ask if they can work on your iPad. If we come over here, that will get you out of the limelight. Well, ladies and gentlemen, members of the board, faculty and staff that have been able to come out, I want to thank you. Tonight is sort of the wrap-up of our budget development. It does not mean the budget process is over, but this is our preliminary final budget overview that will take into effect all of our accounts, all of our codes, and the development of the budget at that point is fully loaded at this point up until today. There will be many potential decisions that we are going to have to look at as we go forward. But as I give a recap, because we have a lot of people watching as well from home, and some that are just joining us, the financial challenges currently facing the district in New York State for the 24-25 school year coming up are not just unique to Horseheads. I think you've been seeing in the news recently, these financial challenges are hitting sporadically across the state, from the island to the North Country to Western New York, to even here, and our colleague district over in Corning, Payne and Post, as well as I know several others for the loss of safe, harmless money this year. So I do believe that these financial challenges are going to persist over the next 2 years, largely because of what I'm about to discuss. First of all, every district goes through a fiscal stress monitoring system. In 21-22, the district was identified as no designation, but we were growing in points that the Office of the State Comptroller shows as indicators that there might be financial stress. All of a sudden in 2023, as we've come out of the pandemic, that stress sort of disappeared. A lot of that is related to some of the items that we were talking about because of the stress that was put on our health system, as well as inflationary rates that we were able to stave off during those years. However, we also have to look back at the time of what is a dirty word, the GEA, and my friends here in red all know what the GEA used to stand for. We wish it was gone, but it does have major lingering effects in all districts. Specifically here in Horseheads, over the Great Recession, what happened was the state withdrew funding from schools. Even though now they're saying they're giving record funding, they really aren't giving record funding to schools. They're replacing the funding that they took and never put back and claiming that they're doing a great job. For Horseheads, each of those years, that's how much funding the district actually lost. And you made substantial cuts, I think almost in the 150 range of staff members. But if that money was never taken or was returned as promised by Governor Cuomo and the legislature, the district would right now currently have an additional $4.3 roughly million a year in our budget. And as you've seen over the past budget presentations, that 4.3 would go a long way right now in closing our initial gap of over $15 million. So we can't persist on it, but we have to know that because that is part of our problem right now. In addition, the challenges that districts are facing, but we're facing because we are self-insured, is number one is the health insurance costs. And this is not due to any one function, any one person, any one situation. But what happens is in health insurance, we are a self-funded district, And our health insurance costs were around $15 to $16 million over the past several years. They have spiked, but COVID brought those spikes down because guess what? Not a lot of people were able to access the health care. We're now 4 years and roughly 15 days out from the start of COVID. And because of that, at this point, things have returned to such a sense of normalcy, health insurance, health procedures that may have been put on hold, or things that have popped up now from being put on hold, or just new areas that have become aware to some of our colleagues and staff are needing to be addressed. And that puts a major, important stress on the system. But added to that is the inflationary factor. All health insurance contracts were settled just prior to COVID. That means that there was already an agreed upon determining amount for every procedure that healthcare facilities, doctors would submit, and our insurance companies would cover. When you're self-funded, you're subject to that inflationary where the plans are not. Now, we're 5 years later, and guess how long those contracts were for? 5 years. So with the inflationary factors that we're all feeling at home, as well as the losses through a pandemic for the insurers, what's happening with those renegotiated settlements that we have no say in? There are going to be major increases, and that's what we are seeing in healthcare. That's no fault of anybody else. It's really no fault of the insurance companies. It's no fault of the insurers that we contract with, our staff, or anybody else. It's the part of we went through a pandemic, and now we have to sort of readjust to the new normal. With that inflationary factor that has come along, that also has hit our contractual services, supplies, utilities, food, labor, etc. And the board has heard me say, and I know our staff has heard us say, when I say labor, it doesn't mean that the cost of labor is exorbitant. All of our contractually bargained agreements are within the region, within the scale, and we thank our units as they've done everything in good faith, and we've tried to do everything in good faith from the board side and the district side, and there's nothing way exorbitantly out of pace. So I want to make sure people understand that's what's happening, whether it's at McDonald's, whether it's in a school, whether it's in municipal government, whether it is in private industry. Inflation is hit, and wages are going to go up, and they are continuing to go up. The hard part is inflation was coming down, and for the past 2 months, inflation now has started to rise again. So it's a balancing factor that the government hasn't figured out quite yet, and it's something that we are going to have to persist with and work with. In addition, there is one part of labor that the district had no control over, and these are for some of our lowest paying workers, and that's minimum wage. They did nothing wrong, but unfortunately for all municipalities and workers in any fashion, private or public, there was a 66% increase in minimum wages. And that is even beyond the normal settlements of contract. That is starting to bear out in our costs. So that's no one's fault, but that was something that was put on to us again outside of our control as an unfunded mandate from the state elected officials. So I don't want anybody to think that anybody's been doing anything wrong. This is just what's happening in our global society right now. And then obviously the last piece is past and ongoing inflationary pressures. They're ongoing because they're not coming down. We have tried to work our financial budget over the year to minimize that on the impact of programs, students, and staff, and also to make sure that we try to provide the best for everyone, our staff, our students, our community. But unfortunately, over the past 8 weeks that we've been talking about it, I think the board has a realization that we have to make a major readjustment at this point. So that you know our funding, here's our tax on true rate, and tax on true is the only way you can evaluate taxes in one district versus another. Tax on true means if you take the same value house, no matter what district in New York State, this number has to be filed with the Office of Real Property Assessment. And the Office of Real Property Assessment for Horseheads has a tax on true rate of $16.38. That means a $100,000 home will have the tax for schools of $1,638. If you compare that to Corning, Elmira Heights, you will see that their tax on true is higher for that same $100,000 home. People will say, well, you have $500,000 homes. It really doesn't matter what price the home is. That's the comparable number that says if there's a $500,000 home in Corning, it will be the same comparable off that tax on true for their rate. And as you can see, in Corning, a $100,000 home is $2,089. In Elmira Heights, it's $1,875. In Elmira, we do not have that number because we can't find it at this point. And this is not comparing saying we're better than them, but it is saying that people sometimes say we have the highest taxes in the area because we have the most expensive houses. We actually have the lowest tax in the area except for Watkins Glen, and that's because they have lakefront visitors to their area that don't live there year round. You can't fault them either. But $1,638 for a $100,000 home is the lowest tax on true for the region. And comparable, we do everything based on that versus everybody else. And if you compare our budget to Corning, we're lower than them by almost $35 million. Same with Elmira. With Elmira Heights, we're much higher, but they're a much smaller school. We're not necessarily comparable in size. So that's one of the things that we try to pride ourselves, because if you notice, when I came in, it was $18.04, and it was projected to go to $18.30. This board, previous boards have done nothing but be good fiscal stewards and grow the district from the Great Recession. Unlike boards of the past that did nothing to improve the property, the functions of the district, the past 10 years have been prosperous, and you all should be commended for that, for those that served through that time and those that have come on. But everything comes with a cost, and that cost is something we're going to have to look at tonight. Tax levy rates and tax levy, you can see over on the right-hand side for 100,000, there's an awful lot of red. That means we were lowering the tax rate. There were some that we were raising the tax rate, but no matter what, we've lowered the tax rate from 1826 down to 1638. That's almost a full $2, $2.12 reduction, or $212 reduction per $100,000 home. That's how you read that. And the tax rate is the most important thing, because we can put up a levy no matter what. We can say we could have a 20% levy, but if we had $100 million growth in the district, that big levy might have a tax rate of 1% or 16 cents on a $100,000 home. So you have to look at that. And those projections, which I will say Katie in her office has been very conservative on, will look at that. It's sort of like if you look at 22-23, we had a tax levy of almost 3%, but ultimately our rate went down by 8%. That's almost a 10% difference. So that's why you cannot confuse levy with rate. Levy only means the amount of money you're changing from one year to the other. Rate means how much money you're either going up or down per thousand. And that's what impacts a home. As I talked to you about the gap elimination for those at home, one of the major problems this budget and other budgets are going to be facing, because no matter what, this is the same case for every single district. The only difference is what is 21.3% of their local funding source. So the area in orange that you can see is the gap years. So the bottom line is what we were able to raise according to the 2% maximum allowable tax levy limit imposed by Governor Cuomo and the legislature. No matter what, they say you can get no more than 2% or CPI, whichever is lower. So when inflation is low, we give it back. But here's the inverse. When inflation is high, and you can see every one of those years it's almost higher than what we're allowed to raise in revenue. When it's high, we don't. That one graph tells you no matter what, every school district is screwed in the future because you can't even keep up with inflationary costs. So if you're supposed to keep up with regional labor, you're supposed to keep up with regional electricity, utilities, supplies, health insurance, how the hell is any school district ever going to keep up? And most superintendents said this back in 2011 when the governor proposed this. If you don't tie it to inflation, you're going to doom every local municipality and school district. The only reason it doesn't do municipalities is to go above that limit. It only takes a board to vote in a municipality. So if you have 5 members and 3 of them said we're going beyond the tax cap, it's done. School districts are the only democracy in New York State where the public decides. You propose, they decide. But no matter what, that public's fighting a losing battle. Now, that doesn't just hold true on our tax rate and tax levy. That holds true at the state too. The bottom line is the funding that the state has provided. Notice there's only 2 years where it crossed over the rate of inflation. One was back where it was 2.7, 2.74, I think about 2016, and it was 4/100. They almost hit it right on. That's what they should be doing. But they don't. They go down and they go down. Last year, they put back foundation aid. They gave everybody on average about 10.42 back. The rate of inflation was 6.4. Considering those positive years and negative years over the same time period, we're still short of keeping up with inflation by 11.3% of funding. When you look at both of these, 21.3%, whether you're here in Corning, the same thing as long as you try to go out at 2%. For us, 21% of our local tax levy is roughly $9.3 million if we kept up with inflation that we would already have in the budget. That would go a long way just closing this gap. Now when you look at the state, 11.3% on foundation aid. In other words, they haven't been funding their constitutional obligation because they set a law that said they will only do this much. That's additional 2.9. That's 9.3, 2.9, or $12.2 million just to keep up with inflation. Then we wouldn't be screwed. Right now, 12.1 minus 15.4, we'd have a $3.3 million gap. And we've already taken it from $15 million, I think, to the last time, I think it was 4.9, right, Katie? Down to 4.9. So we could have easily been able to adjust if we've been given the tools to be successful. This isn't a local issue, this is a state functional issue. And people should be a little irate because no matter what, I can't control inflation, the board can't control inflation, our workers can't control inflation. Our community can't control it. But everybody understands that we do have to adjust to it in one way or another. So that sort of says where we are and why we're here. Now some people will say, well, we didn't get here overnight, why weren't you damn well planning for it beforehand? It's a great question. We've never had to think about the inflationary factors because honestly, when you see some of the slides tonight, 15 million, 15 million, 18 million because of a different issue. It wasn't necessarily all at once. And then 15 million or 16 million, then all of a sudden 17 million in healthcare next year. And we're already at a certain point, at this point, that we can project that we're going to be at 20. When we had 15.5 or 16 million in the budget, that's our budget problem. And you'll see in these slides tonight, there's a $3.6 million increase in healthcare that we have to budget for. Because we have an obligation to do that. So no matter what, we have to pay that. And if we don't have the funds on one side, we either raise the funds through tax levy, through state aid, reductions to meet the need. And that's what we're going to be talking about tonight. You will not see major changes in the budget tonight. Over the past 8 weeks, we have been trying to look under every rock and cranny and try to do everything to keep program in place and still be operational. We are sort of at the end of those resources that now we have to turn and look at more difficult choices. So, setting that up on a more somber note, I will come back at the end, but I wish to turn it over to our Assistant Superintendent of Business, Ms. Katie Gazette. Any questions for me? Yes?
Slide number 7 at the bottom.
What? I don't know which one it is. You tell me.
This,
Yep.
is that our highest rate? Or we just?
That I could find right now, 1940 back in 2006, 2007. It was actually a little bit higher back in the 90s, I think, I'm not sure.
Okay, thank you.
But yeah, we gave that as a adjust. I tried to use these because that's reasonable within the past 10 decades. Okay. Ms. Bizet?
No.
Oh, you're up first. Well, I'm sorry. I am turning it over to the Assistant Superintendent, Mr. Tony Gill. You can have the drive keys.
Good evening. So in our normal budget presentation in our cycle that we normally do, I'll be presenting on the instructional budget as it is and what we plan for in a normal year for next year. Katie will follow up with the benefits presentation, and then we'll do an overview of where we've been, as Tom was alluding to in our previous presentations, and where we stand as of the end of the night, and move into discussion. So, but first we'll do a normal routine thing, which we do every year, which is need to talk about the instructional overview. So you'll see a number of items here. Salaries, like usual, will be broken down in the next particular slide. We do have some notes to make mention to. The contractual, you will see an increase there. This is primarily due to our SRO contract. While we've been working to reduce other areas, there were reductions in this line, but because of the appropriate allocation for the SRO program as it is why you see that $70,000 or nearly $70,000 increase in contractual line. Conferences have come down a little bit. They will likely come down further as we look at that line thoroughly throughout our buildings and departments. Supplies does note a slight increase. That also too will be addressed. We are working as an admin team to look at numerous supply lines within the building level, classroom supply, office supply, where we could do without in a short term. Again, I want to reiterate, a lot of the things we were doing are not long-term solutions, but simply to get us through a tough time. The largest increase in net supplies in Italy was a shift in money from grant-funded services to continue our curriculum work. There are ancillaries that go into that work that aren't covered in any other place. You have to buy them as a supply for teachers to have things to use with students. That isn't necessarily part of our curriculum, especially in our BOE and math at the lower levels, but also in the other grade levels. So there was an addition admittedly to that, but we will look to other areas to continue to hone that line. Equipment, you see we've taken some reductions there. We're always very careful with our equipment lines as you cannot transfer into them. It is what it is. It's what you got for the year. We do have furniture and other things that have replacement cycles that have to be considered. So we'll continue to look at that line, knowing again short term, but there are needs that things have to be replaced. There are stuff that goes in disrepair every year that needs to be purchased. The BOCES is where you're going to see a lot of the work from the last couple of meetings going into that $600,000 decrease through a variety of factors. This includes the reduction of our P-TECH program, our middle school alt-ed, the service we provide for our instructional coaches through BOCES, the technical instructional coach, and a variety of other COSERs. Community schools was mentioned last time, as well as distance learning. All those have collectively come to about a $600,000 increase or decrease. We continue to look there and to hone that line to try to find more savings. Remember, a large part of that BOCES bill just comes in our CTE and administrative costs, and it's kind of wrapped up there. But beyond that, we'll do what we can. Tuition, that stays stagnant. Again, this is our responsibility specifically for like a charter school and tuition, the cost. Foster care placement tuitions, we feel comfortable with keeping that line the same. Textbooks is a fixed number that's given to us by the state. It's per pupil allocation. We spend that each year. You might have remembered a couple of meetings ago me talking about hoping the state would open up the expenditures in textbooks to include some of our LMS, the idea that we do electronically. We don't buy our workbooks anymore. We make them ourselves and print them, and our print costs have gone up, but our textbooks get less used. And there's a hope as advocacy to say, hey, our textbooks look different nowadays. They're not the anthologies they were that we were when we were all in school. And so can you help us out with this textbook? I think there's something to be said there that $58 per child, definitely 25 cents per child, we could spend that and do, as we move to a more digital world and updating that. So, but that is an allocation and we spend that. So it's, use it or lose it. So because of the work we've done in my, through my department, we do see that it's only a slight increase of 1.96%. Any questions? I'll get the salaries in the next slide, but any questions on any of those lines?
I have a question on the textbooks.
Yes.
So are those textbooks just for like higher grade levels that you're utilizing it with?
No.
Do they just stay within the classroom then for the most part?
Yeah, so a textbook, it can be defined in a number of different ways. It could be like the readers that go home. It could be ancillary. Don't think a large textbook, right? We do have some flexibility that we can purchase. If you're familiar with the reader, I'm not sure if you, the little books that kids will bring home that they have to read that night from their classroom teacher, that is part, we can purchase that through textbooks. So it's not always your large anthology, history, English textbooks, no, or science textbooks. No, we do use them all the way down and spend that money all the way to kindergarten. The allocation, 5 pupil, K through 12, at $58 per kid. So we spend it between the two, for both elementary and secondary.
Okay, and this is that for textbooks, that's what the state minimum is. So the state says you have to at least spend this much.
They give us that money to spend.
We're at that minimum line.
I believe so. If I was, I can't.
Yes.
But we could allocate for more if we wanted.
We could.
But we are choosing the minimum.
Yes, and that is because we're struggling to spend that given the digital age we're in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The hard part is, if we don't spend it, we lose it too. That's how the state's always. Now, they do open it up that you can use for certain things such as software here and there. There's little
Library
nuances
tools.
that they can do.
We do have that opportunity at library expenditures as well, but those are different lines in this textbook. In the end, we are given it, we have an amount we spend, we try to spend it out appropriately within the, that can be gray area a lot in that particular line to make sure that we're spending it well.
Thank you.
Here's a breakdown of our particular salary codes and by line. Slight changes over the last couple of years. The biggest change coming in our pre-K4, we did bring on some RTI teachers through our grant, and this shows us carrying those some additional positions at the pre-K4 that were now coming off our grant cycle. So that's why we see some, and then plus the number of FTE you see in your pre-K4 in the multiplier normal contractual obligations, you'll see that increase from the 6.0 million to 6. No real changes in from year to year from last year in the 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9, 12. For those that don't need to remember how the heck do we get a 0.99 of a person and how that all works, you'll see it comes out to whole numbers. This is to account for traveling teachers, specifically in our E&L program in our music department, our orchestra. So if they spend a lot of time in a certain building, the allocation of their time and therefore how they're paid comes out of a particular code as opposed to another. So that changes from year to year, those decimals, but they still add up to the whole equal. When we look at the educational support, that would be my team and the clerical associated with it. No change in that as far as people, neither with principals and clerical. Counselors from year to year, you'll remember that we offered, put up last meeting, I believe, a reduction in a high school clerical that was unfilled. And so there was a reduction in the counselor's clerical line. And CTE instruction, remember, is your technology teachers. They're just coded differently by the state. They don't get placed in any of the 9 through 12 or the 7, 8. They're your business, your tech, and your family consumer science teachers are placed in that line. Librarians maintain, and if you look year to year, you're going to see a change in the teaching assistants. That's because the accounting measure we talked about last time, we're moving our monitors specifically over into our school lunch program. So there was if you look year to year, you're going to see a change in that particular line. So we go from a $23 million from last year to a 24. Questions? Last slide is some other miscellaneous instructional salary-related items, our instructional stipends. This is our contractual stipends for pre-K through 12. You'll find it's our intramural program. It's the grade level, department level chairs take up a good chunk of that. Our activity period expenditure, it was the primary reason for that increase was to cover activity periods at the high school. So that's where you're going to see that. And we had some additional music stipends that came on that particular line. So that's why you see that a little bit more than usual significant increase in the stipends. Again, it's bringing on the activity periods and some miscellaneous stipends that have been added. In service, you see a flat fee curriculum. You'll notice a $100,000 reduction. You'll remember that that was a amendment in ARP that we're using that money to cover, so we can take $100,000 out of our operational budget. Home instruction. This is our tutoring cost to provide, in those special circumstances, instruction to kids at home. Substitute teacher line has gone up slightly. Primarily, this comes through our, sadly, we're not being able to fill some of our positions in our buildings. And we've been gracious enough to bring back some retired teachers, but they come with a greater cost than a substitute, normal substitute. So we do have to right now budget appropriately for that line to continue with that level. Anticipating hopefully that some of those will stay on with us. So that is the largest increase we see in our substitute teachers. With any hope that the market will change and we'll have a greater opportunity to hire teachers and fill positions, but when we can't, we have relied on some retired teachers that come at a little bit of a higher price point. And lastly, a slight reduction in the teaching assistants and aid and extra pay. That is a line also we're looking to hone a little bit, but small change in that and reduction. Any questions on any of those?
I just had a couple questions. So you were talking about the stipends for the activity period. How are those stipends, so how are people picked for that to be activity period people?
This is an agreement we have with the unit where we talked about how to go about that. So that's just the conversations we've had with the leadership.
Okay, and then is that only for the high school or is it middle
Correct.
school? Or okay, so
We're the only one that have
only
an
high
activity
school.
period. Yeah.
Okay, and then what are we cutting from the curriculum?
So that, like I said, was $100,000 we reduced to pick up an ARP for the amendment. So in the last board meeting, will come up with a slide from now. The ARP amendment was to add $100,000 to the already existing curriculum line with the money that was unspent, so that we can offset $100,000 here in the operational.
So then when we're looking at the next year,
Yep.
we're going to be having to increase that line back up.
Possibly,
Plus
or we're just
the-
going to have to be smart about it. Let's just say that we're just going to have to be wary of what we hold close and what's going to be important at that time. It's a decision for another year. But as we've all said, this is not sustainable. We do have to get through a year of some tough times, maybe 2 years of some tough times, and understand how this all plays out and see it and work together to get that. But for now, we can safely put that down to that amount.
Okay, and does the state mandate the curriculum line, the amount of money that we spend on it?
Yeah.
Okay.
And for those, and for those that will recall, this is state that loves to keep changing things on us. Any given curriculum, every 7 years, they like to throw another exam, or a new assessment, or a new curriculum to follow, or to a framework. We have several in the hopper right now. We're working on the science changes that's going to come with the change of the 5th grade curriculum, the 5th grade assessment. We want to make sure those teachers are prepared, so we use this allotment of money to help them prepare for that assessment, therefore benefit our students. So it is necessary money if we're going to, hope to help students. However, we could be conscious about that and think about different ways to do that, but we do need that money to move forward in our curriculum work. Any other questions at all? Lastly, just as a reminder, before I hand it off to Katie, this is the Smart School Bond. We have that posted. Everything is in order. The next time we'll have to talk as a board, the board having an item on the agenda will be on the 18th, and we'll see where things stand at that point and whether we want to approve this particular plan, or would require additional money to do so. Remember that the 171 laptops and 20 interactive boards, that 241,000 remaining, is critical to offset our operational budget and to make reductions there, but still get the things that we need in hand.
Okay, so we'll do an overview of, I guess I'll come to the hot topic of the budget cycle this year. This is our complete overview of everything that makes up the benefits component of our school budget. $26.6 million budget at this point for all things considered benefits. The first three items are the ERS and TRS contributions, the district share that we pay into the system for our employees, and Social Security, the FICA Med portion on payroll taxes. That's all the district share. ERS and TRS are based on the prescribed rates from the state. Social Security, we do budget very tightly. You'll see it's actually down a little bit this year. And that goes to show just how nuanced and tightly we're budgeting these particular items this year. Health admin fees, this incorporates the fee that we pay to Excelis for the administration of our healthcare plan, and it also contains our stop loss insurance for high claimants. Our stop loss health insurance is currently budgeted around $700,000, waiting for the renewal rate to come in. We have talked several times in the past about the cost benefit of maintaining that insurance. Right now, our attachment point is we receive reimbursement for any one high claimant that exceeds $325,000. So anything over that amount for a singular claimant, we get that money back. And we've been mindful of that attachment point versus the amount of premium that we budget and balancing those two factors out. So at this point, we're budgeted to remain the same, but we'll see what those premium renewal rates come in at, and we'll have a deeper discussion in our finance meeting to decide how to move forward. Health claims, Dr. Douglas talked about this earlier. Claims are up. We all know they're up. We are currently budgeting to bump our claims up for active and retirees up to $20 million. We are keeping a close look on that for this year. Claims continue to be high. Again, as Dr. Douglas said, to no fault of anyone. They're using it appropriately, and it's the benefit all are entitled to, but the costs have gone up. So we are watching very closely on the impacts of these claims for this year and how we want to handle them for the upcoming year. Health contributions, we've discussed this before. We're going to receive $600,000 more in health contributions from our employees. Those are based on premium equivalent rates, based on our claims experience over the last several years, and the employee's portion is prescribed within collective bargaining agreements. So we're expecting to receive a little over $4 million in contributions from the employees to support our plan. Health buyouts, there's a contractual benefit to our employees that if you have insurance elsewhere and can opt out of our plan, there is a buyout that you can take. So currently, we're budgeting for 73. I actually talk about that number in a little bit. That will need to go up based on projected participation in that benefit. Dental claims, we're holding flat at the $275,000. We are self-insured for our dental claims, and that number seems to still continue to be reasonable at this point. Workers' compensation, we're waiting for the renewal rate to come in. We did change carriers this current year to realize some cost savings on premiums. Excellent level of service, but we were able to realize some savings there. Anticipating a favorable renewal rate that should still fit within the current $281,000. Affordable care Act fees, there's a specific fee we have to file for each year based on the number of members on the plan. It's a set, I think it's going up to $3.22 per person on the plan. That's calculated by our healthcare consultant. There's some options of calculation, so that $6,600 is sufficient as well. Other includes unemployment, disability, flex, and optical for a total of that $26.6 million, increase of 15%, primarily as we discussed the increase to health claims. questions on the overview? As I said, our contributions to ERS and TRS are prescribed for us for 24-25. It's estimated to be 10.02%. This chart shows the historical trend that we've been obligated to pay for TRS. You know, for the most part, TRS has held fairly okay. Contribution rates are market sensitive, so there may be impacts that we'll see in later years. ERS projected at 15.2%, up from 13.1%. So that's the change that we're allowed to levy a tax on, and then the tax cap calculation, because it's over 2% growth. But again, in historical reference, you know, not a whole lot of movement. The earlier years, like TRS, were higher. But again, market sensitive. We'll have to see where these rates go in the future. So claims data, I think this is what, you know, we really need to spend some time on. So this chart shows historical data of full years of health claims. So full fiscal years of health claims going back from 2013-14 to 22-23. We're showing year-to-date for the current year through the end of February. That's the last full month of data that we have. So through the end of February, we're just shy of $13 million. And you'll see from the subsequent years, we were at 17 last year, 15 the 2 years before. So we're creeping up there very quickly, and the year's not done. And then a February to February, so we have that apples to apples comparison. You'll see that by this February this year, we've already exceeded where we've been in the past years.
And if I can answer that question of how did you not see this coming, I will tell you, from Katie's business office, when we moved away from BOCES, this is what we finally got to, that we can start predicting where we're going to be at the end of the year, which BOCES would not provide us. We are finally in the first year of fully being able to see ahead through Katie's office, Ms. Parazzolo doing this. So this is a tool we will have going forward that really no other district has. So unfortunately, it also is giving us some agita too.
So based on the claims data we have to date, looking through the end of March, we're almost through March, so we're using what we have now. Our claims are projecting to be that 20 million mark, if not a little bit over. Some weeks are very high. We get weekly claims invoices, and they're high. There's no bones about it. So we're keeping an eye on, you know, the fluctuations, low weeks, high weeks, how they're averaging out to see how this year's really going to end up. Any questions on this year?
You said the projected total for this year you think is around 20 million?
And that's a very good question, just because of the fact you see in our budget 20 million. Should we be higher? Unfortunately, I don't think we can do that right now, but we're trying to get much farther ahead than we were. That's why we believe this is probably a 1 to 2 year fix.
And not included yet in that projection, we do get quarterly prescription rebates. We've received 3 so far. Our projection does not yet include the fourth quarter, because they're not something that's entirely predictable. But there is an opportunity for an offset when we receive that June payment also. Not enough to solve the problem, but it would certainly take a bite out of it. Final questions on benefits before we hit the overview? Okay. So not a lot has changed since last we met, so I'll just go through what has changed at this point. Building aid is highlighted, as we've talked several times before, working with fiscal advisors as we're getting more final information from the state on our capital projects. We're able to adjust our building aid, so we're able to tick it up a little bit more at $76,491. Only change me to the slide is that number. So projected state aid is just over $4 million increase. Tax levy limit The same story here. So again, the change here is that capital exclusion updated with that increase in the building aid. Current allowable tax levy calculation is $6.3 million or 14.58%. That is the maximum allowable amount for the calculation prescribed by the state. This is what requires a 50% simple majority to adopt. That 2% that we hear about is just that one highlighted line. That doesn't mean that it is actually a 2% cap. So that 14.58% is the law, and that 5.8 capital exclusion piece is part of our long-term capital planning of the local share of the debt for the 2 referendums.
And it's important what Katie said there, that 14.58 is officially the 2% levy cap. And that's how we should be saying it. That's what the governor, the legislature says every municipality and district should be at that level, or CPI, whichever is lower. That 14.58 is 2% levy cap. So we want to make sure people know. We're not proposing at this point going above that 2% levy cap. And that's how we've said it for the past 6 or 7 or 8 years. So I'm hoping people will remember, we're not doing more, even though we're still not at the rate of inflation where we should be. Unless the board decides to go above.
Summary of our budgeted revenues. Again, the only change is that minor adjustment to the building aid within the state aid line. Again, note that tax items line does not include the levy amount. This is everything we have that we know is coming in with the exclusion of the levy, fund balance, and reserves. Quick overview of the adjustments made to date. End of February. Here's the list of things that we reduced for a total of just shy of $1.4 million. Some more of the routine adjustments that net out to $2,000. BOCES changes, a decrease of $300,000. And then other items, we are able to identify $1.5 million. So some adjustments for tonight. Again, as we're going through this process, there are the routine things that will need to go up or need to go down, separate and apart from the work we need to do to balance this budget. So this list will be those routine items that we're going to walk through. So the tuition codes can be reduced by $55,000. Twofold. One is tuition we're paying to another school for servicing of a particular kiddo that's no longer necessary, and an increase in our tuition to a charter school. BOCES, this time of the budget cycle, we get a new run from BOCES with some updated figures. So there was an increase in the cost of some of our special education services, but we also decreased the BOCES budget by the reduction of one of our network technicians. Bill has a good team and a good handle on the management of our technology and our network, that we're comfortable going down by one technician for the upcoming year. Spent some time with Kelly Squires going over the full gamut of the student services budget, and she was able to identify $25,000 as reductions. Various salary reductions, primarily decreased. There was an issue with the calculation of those mid-year course credit increases we talked about last time. There was a hiccup when the data went to BOCES. Since adjusted that and corrected it, so there was a decrease there. But we also had to increase the budget because of the increase in the tutoring requirement, the hours required at the tutoring center, so we had to increase the pay for the folks that work our tutoring center. Transfer to other funds. This is the money that we moved to school lunch in the federal fund. We're increasing that by $57,000. School lunch, we transfer money for their share of BOCES aid and the BOCES refund. and money moves to the federal fund for the general funds portion of some special ed programming.
Can you point out that these are adds to the budget, basically, not subtractions?
So the first four are reductions. The one I just spoke of and the one I'm about to speak of is an addition. So benefits is going to increase by $54,000. I mentioned before when we were talking about the benefit side, there has to be an adjustment to that buyout portion. That's what in large part that is. Transportation department did a full review of their budget items, being mindful of the inflationary impacts on the things they need to purchase to keep our buses safe and passing inspections and things of that nature. So we did have to increase their budget by $19,000. And then some small miscellaneous things that totaled up to an increase of $8,000 for a net wash of a savings of $1,500. So I think you can tell from this that things are getting very thin and very tight, and opportunities for trimming within the budget are running out.
I had a quick question. Can I ask a quick question? Sure. Well, when you were saying the transportation department for the 19,000, is that different from the presentation that we already saw?
Yes.
Okay, because they had like, it was steady, so now we've had to go back through and add more to their budget.
Yeah, so that's the process. You know, we roll and open the budget, best guesstimate at the time, but everything gets reviewed and fine-tuned until it's finally adopted in April. So that's the process we just did with transportation.
Okay, thank you.
No, I think that it actually, I think that's really a good point. That's the hardest part about developing a budget, that we've been doing this now almost 8 weeks. And we start, like we say, with a rollover budget, and then we start looking at how do we solve the problem. But all during that time, during that 8 weeks, we're going in and refining and really digging into areas that you have to go through each year. And that's the hard part, and I think what Ms. Bizzetti was trying to say is, remember, we've been coming with you with reduction, where we can trim, where we can trim, where we can trim, because we've been doing that. Well, sooner or later, it starts to flip, and this is delayed. Now we're going through, and we think pretty much, at the end of tonight, you have the budget developed, at least. We've gone through everything. There's still refining, and there's still work to do. But at this point, we don't really seem to see many more ads unless we miss something. So at that point, the budget's developed. The hardest part now, and just looking at the notes here real quick before I put this next slide up, is this still leaves us with a gap, because remember, 4.9 million was last. That's the only thing that we've been able to take out of the budget, so it's still 4.89997 something. I won't do the quick math. I can't do that quick. But that means that we're at the point that we are going to have to make recommendations to the board for some very difficult decisions from 2011, 2012 time, that there were reductions and that we are trying to do it differently, more strategically. In those times, pretty much every district on one day or a week cut over 35,000 jobs in less than 2 years. I do not believe we're at that time, but I can tell you a colleague has cut over 88 jobs last week in this area. And they're going to have, as a board, decisions to make too. I'm waiting for a call back. I don't know if they're going to go out at their 2% or if they're going to challenge, but we kind of need to talk and understand that, because I've got to give you information as well. But at this point, we have to start making possible reductions. It pains me, because I've been a proponent with our AD to sit here and try to provide the most amount of maximum participation for students in extracurriculars and athletics across this district. I think we do it better than any other district here. And it's something that we provided normally 900 kids in 3 seasons the opportunity to participate, and this year we're well over 1,500 students participating. some people have even brought up that contention in the community, but we know what we're here for is students. We're here for our community, we're here for our staff. We have an obligation to balance this budget, and that's the hard part. I've gone through this 4 times in almost 40 years, and I don't envy it. I don't like looking at my colleagues and having to disappoint them. I don't like having to tell people that we'll get through this. But at this point, we are going to take the next week or two to have some of those difficult conversations. And then bring those recommendations to you to try to minimize program impacts, and there will be some. I can't say major program impacts, I can't say minor. But it may be that we are going to have to think of different ways that we do things and operate. We are going to have to do more with less. And we are going to have to do, as administrators and staff, more with what we have. And I know we will rise to that challenge, but as Tony said, this is our expected temporary to then rebuild, which is a cyclical format of education dynamics, no matter what that's been going on since the 80s, 90s, 2000, 2010, and now 2024. So possible reductions for tonight, and this is the only ones that I'm putting up, because when we start talking about our family, we need to have personal conversations as best possible with people closest to individuals to try to make sure that we assist. I can inform the board that I've already talked to fellow superintendents. We are gathering employment lists because there are job opportunities right here in the southern tier in education that are going unfilled. So our goal is to try to assist everybody as possible if they are affected by the decisions we're ultimately going to have to make. No matter what, I can only bring you the recommendations. Eventually the board's going to have to struggle, which is probably going to be April 11th, to give us final direction. If there's any deviations from our recommendations, we understand. But we'll need solutions because we don't have any. The hardest part about these future decisions is if a budget does not pass, you can put it up a second time. If that budget does not pass, we must cut $15.4 million out of this budget, period. So anybody that wants to say don't support the school district can go ahead and do it. I advise you, you get what you end up deciding upon as a community. And I do not believe the Horseheads community thinks that way at all. But I'm also not going to take it for granted, and I don't think the board does. So we have to have some deliberate debates and discussion, and some of that's going to be tonight. So, without further ado, no matter what, our goal is to try to keep our programs as best as possible intact. With that, proposed budget adjustments for tonight, and these are just proposed. I'll need direction for you if you say, I understand that, and so forth. Athletics, roughly $102,000 cut, reduce one team per sport at the modified and unified levels. So in other words, we have two teams in a lot of sports. We'll go back to that one team, but it affects participation drastically. We have two in unified. I can't recommend in good conscience any reduction other than a second team in unified, because our unified program is no different than our varsity program. In addition, we've added a variety of coaches, and all worth it. But at this time, temporarily, and I would encourage the board, as soon as possible, revert back, because this helps our kids. At least 3 modified assistants, 14 varsity assistants. We actually have some more, but that's where we're starting at right now. Because we don't know for sure which programs may have such a bigger need safety. But if we have to, we're really going back to what we had before we started the ads. So this is our best adjustment right now for consideration. In addition, extracurricular clubs, this is across the district. We can't necessarily give you a number right now, but if we're doing this like we added here, we added to the clubs, there's going to be reductions. We'll have to look at participation levels functionality. Some clubs we have in the budget that aren't running, so obviously, those would probably be areas that we would try to target. Again, we're going to try to keep this as much away from the students, but still have our program. We think we can get there to balance out this budget. So, with that, that's all we have. We feel really crappy just bringing this. But because the only reason, and this involves people, we just don't know which people yet. Because it depends on the sport, it depends on the number of participants. We are going to look at our communities to try to ask them to assist us to provide more opportunities, which I think they'll want to as well. But as we go through this, we will look at that. If we set a number, we know next year we can look at all of our programs and decide at that time, logically and reasonably, what's appropriate to try to make sure we take care of our students, our kids, our staff, and our program. So extracurricular clubs, we're probably looking at something as proportional as possible. The athletics, we didn't want to put a number up there, but we have some ideals, and then as we do that, between the next 2 weeks, we'll put a confirmed number up there. But we need, honestly, we just need time. Every waking moment is pretty much, and even sleepless moments, are thinking about the budget for me and my team. And I imagine after tonight, you as well. I know for our staff, after tonight, everybody will be on edge. And we're trying to minimize that. So, budget summary meetings. You have all the budget summaries for the past 3 budgets. We started out at $108,802,293. We've made the reductions that we can down to this point, down to 105, 539, 963, $3.262330 million that we've removed out of the budget. I'm going to tell you right now, all of that has to go. I'm going to ask you, do not even get into that area because we still have almost 4.9 million. And if you take something out, I gotta fill it with something else. Everything we have will have impacts, will have potential ripple effects, but we believe we can manage those ripple effects at this point. Correct? As best possible. But that's our job as administrators and the team and my staff and our instructional staff. Budget summary year to year. We're at 93.8. Our budget for next year is 105,539. It's an $11,600,000 increase of 12.41%. From one year over to the next. And you already know almost 4 million is healthcare. Current budget gap. Katie did some magic today and gave some estimates. If you notice, the expenditures are 105,539, 963. Our revenues 100,564,561. And you see now a reserve and fund balance projection of our suggested use. That brings our gap down to 3.275 million from 4.9. Those are the tools we have. So if you look up here, final potential 2% tax levy decision is at 6.3 million, which that was as of tonight, and the board sort of gave us direction. We locked that in for right now. The board sort of indicated we're not going lower. If we go lower, that gap goes up. Additional state aid, we were lucky enough to get some building aid. There's still $500,000 in potential foundation aid that could come to us. We do not anticipate it. So our driving factor is now 3.3. Some people would love to say, hey, it's 2.8. The problem is our budget's so tight, we have to build some potential room in case that health insurance goes over. Remember how we said 20 million? Well, 20,000,005 is just giving about a 2% increase or 3% increase in that health insurance from projected ending this year to next year. So we have to be careful because if we just took all that $500,000 out of reductions this year, we may have to fill that hole next year. So again, we're trying to look at it as a 2-year positioning. Obviously, we looked at fund balance use of $1 million. We looked at use of reserves of ERS 500,000, EBLAR 200,000. And we've already made the budget reductions that we'd say stay away from at this point, that all our tools, that's why they're in black, that we'd like to at least lock in for now. We may have to tweak some, but that's our suggestion to the board. Ultimately, the budget is the board's, but we try to give you the best advice and parameters to go forward. At 3.3 million, we have a lot of work to do in a week. Discussion and direction from the board? Yes.
I have one clarifying question.
Sure.
For extracurriculars, is there a stipend associated with those positions?
Those are all stipend positions. So if I say, what was one that wasn't running? Was it? What was it? Say Art Club wasn't running. And say it had $1,500. And I hate to say it, that's still $1,500. Right? If that's not running, if we're not running it, why would we have it in the budget? It creates a hole in the budget for us, which is good, surplus. But at this point, we're looking for things that we can remove. Does that make sense?
It doesn't.
Yes.
In athletics, you were suggesting 3 modified assistant coaches, 14 varsity. What about JV?
What it is that's just how the terminology is in the contract. So they could be JV, they could be varsity, they could be modified assistants. It's just how we hire them.
Could you please clarify for me what, the ERS, the 500,000 from that, and the, what,
EBLA.
yeah, what are those?
ERS is Employment Retirement Service, right? But, yeah,
That's
Employee Retirement System. It's alphabet soup time. EBLAR is Employee Benefit Liability and Reserve.
Okay, so this is what you were suggesting at the last board meeting, that we take out of the retirement systems to try to get the million from the other million?
Out of our reserves, not out of the system.
These are the reserves?
Yes.
These are the reserve funds?
This is money that we have set aside for rainy days and it's pouring.
For the, but this is for retirees. This is the retiree?
No, it's for
reserves?
us to use and offset our budget. Say we have something with our retired, like the cost of ERS has gone up, what, 13%? Go
So
ahead.
we can use the funds in our ERS reserve to offset the cost of the district's portion that we pay to the ERS fund. So our bill is around like $1.1 million now. We can take $500,000 in reserve to help offset the district's cost of that contribution.
Okay.
So
I
money
think-
we have in savings set aside specifically for the purpose of offsetting the cost of our ERS contribution.
So
Okay.
it helps to create a hole in the budget because you're using your budget, but you're using the reserve to pay that portion of the budget, now freeing up that funds for something.
So when you were showing us the slide, that was like that 10%, and then the contribution you're talking about, we wouldn't have to pay as much in that contribution section.
We have to pay the full amount, but instead of the general fund paying the full amount, we can support that payment with $500,000 from our savings specifically earmarked for that bill. So if we didn't do that, we would have to find $500,000 more in reductions to support the budget, but we can use our savings as another funding mechanism to support our expenditures.
Okay, but that savings is for potentially like in the future when you wanted to be able to use it towards that specific, the employee retirement services. If you didn't want to use it, that would just still sit in that savings account for future use.
Correct.
Now, are we going to get the numbers of what the reserve funds are? Like something that was more, like something that's more specific? Because I see that we have fund balance for $1 million, but what is the actual total fund balance? Are we going to get that, like, what, because the last meeting, you said something about 3.4 unassigned
So
fund
all
balance.
that information is in our annual audit report.
So go back to the September meeting.
Yep, the June 30th fiscal year end audit report has all the information about our fund balance and reserves.
Oh, the June 30th one, the one from June.
Yeah.
And that's on board docs, I can find it?
Board docs and our website.
I do believe it's also in our monthly fiscal reports that the board gets as well, because you go through and you'll have all the line items, the encumbrances, and then you have fund balance and reserves that are in there too.
Okay, so I'm just trying to get an understanding of like what all the accounts, like total funds look like. And then thinking about areas that we have to cut, are we gonna get more itemized details about the expenditures in the different departments? I know that we have like the overview, but are we gonna get anything that's more itemized to understand? Because it's difficult to see, I know you guys get to see the functionality because you get to talk to people and you get to see, you know, you guys are coming to us with your best recommendations. But, you know, for me, if I have to vote on something that's more specific, I'd like to have more information about what it is exactly that I'm not so generalized, you know, like what each, you know, so okay, we have sports just because that was the cut. This is how much we use for our sports program every year. This is the allocation, and this is what the breakdown is of what is spent on that, you know, like maybe whatever it is. Uniforms gets X amount, coach salaries get X amount. Just wondering if we get something more specific within each department to see that, to see like what it is that we're actually spending the money on. Because if we have to make such huge drastic cuts, I'd really like to have a more, a much better understanding. Because this is very general for me and I need.
The budget is very general. This is the way the board has directed us to build this budget. You get every month our encumbrance report and the detailed budget. That you could technically use that to look in and zero in on anything that you want to ask us questions about and so forth. Once the budget's built and we make the recommendations, we will develop a final line item budget, but we don't do that from week to week because we'd be changing every item in it pretty much regularly. If the board wishes to do an item analysis of the budget, we will be happy to comply if you can tell us anything differently that we're doing with our staffing, our supplies, and everything else. We would be happy to relinquish this, but I don't think the board would want to do that because of the amount of immense time that we spend that the board would not necessarily have available to them is the best way I think. But I'd ask the board president and the board to make those determinations.
Well, so like when you sent us the one email that talked about the cutting the, whatever the computers program was, that was, you said it would save us like $35,000 or $40,000 by cutting out, like how many, so I guess one of my generalized questions would be how many computerized programs do we have? Like I know we just started doing that whole thing where whatever the security system is that we use, yeah. Like how much do we spend on that, or like?
Spend a lot on it because it's security.
Well, and then, okay, so, and then what about like, you know, the traversa system at the
We
bus?
spend a lot on that for busing because that's what routes our buses for our parents to get their kids picked up.
Great, well, so my question is, I guess I would like to know, like, because those things are generalized and you're saying we spend a lot of money on that, and to me, I know that those are things that are important, but I guess if it's gonna come down to a person in a classroom, if it's something that at one point we were able to live without it, I would like to understand, okay, we can cut that because we can, I would like to try to not cut people. I would rather try to cut those types of things, but I don't know how much any of those costs. You know, like I know we use the campus for our learning system. I don't know how much that costs. Does that mean we decide to go back to books and
That
save
will
us
have a
that way.
cost.
Right, so,
Yeah.
you know, I'm not trying to say that, I'm not judging, I don't have any idea.
Well, I
And so
understand.
I'm just trying to get an idea so I can make a really well-informed decision, that's all.
I would sit there and humbly say, that's why you hire administrators to do this. And that's why we are coming to you, and we have racked our brains for 8 weeks and came up with $3.2 million in reductions to try to stay away from our staff, which are our staff that we don't want to have to do this to as well. And we are giving that best recommendation. If any member of the board would like to come in and sit down with us, we will happily sit down with you. But then be prepared to spend every day with us from here on out. Because I'm going to be meeting with people tomorrow. And no matter what, 3.3 million, there's not stuff we do that you can just cut. Now it is, we have to look at dynamics to try to minimize program reductions or maintain program what we can maintain. That's the hard part. And no matter what, in this budget, there are certain things. Can't touch healthcare, you can't touch, really, you can touch equipment, because if you don't have equipment, hey, we can make some savings there, but we still have to operate. We can cut all curriculum, but we still have to teach, and we have to do curriculum. We can cut all professional development. The hard part is in 2011, I think, there was a decision made to cut all department chairs, all grade level chairs, all have 50% for maintenance. I can't second guess, but I would have never done that. And that's not anybody's fault. That's what they chose to do. The district still has to operate. There will be people that say cut all the administration. Where will the building be when all of a sudden the first complaint comes in and somebody has to address it, and they don't want to address it with whoever the complaint's about? There's gives and takes on all of that, and that's the hard part. And boards have their administrative team, especially the superintendent, to try to make that, because we are the educational professionals. And we will try to do what's best for all of our family as well as our board. But I'll take direction from the board, and we'll make the reductions that the board would like to make at this point. Mr. Johnson.
I think it's helpful for the public and the board to understand when we get into situations like this. I don't know what the exact percentages of course is, but your average school district, about 75% of the budget is wrapped up in people. You can cut software and textbooks and things, but that's only about 25% of your budget. And so when we have to cut massive amounts of money, it's really difficult, and I think that's what Dr. Douglas is trying to get to, is it's really difficult not to be able to touch people ultimately, and ultimately our kids and the services they receive. So, I mean, I'm going to put my trust in the administration, because they actually have to see the staff every day that they're talking about, whereas we come in, once a month or twice a month to do this piece. But I'm going to put my trust in the administration that they're going to keep us the program strong as possible through this, with recommendations that make sense, and have some humanity and a little bit of humility with them, and their best guess and best efforts on how we can close these gaps.
Going the wrong way, sorry. Ms. Corbin.
I agree, absolutely. These people work so hard on this. But I think in previous board meetings, we had presentations from various factors. Transportation came, special ed, instruction, and gave us more specifics for their particular focus on what was spent, why it was spent, what the changes were. And I'm sure those are all, somewhere to go back and look at them more carefully.
They are continuing with the.
But they all presented, very specifically where their monies were going and what changes needed to be made.
Any direction from the board? Mr. Christmas?
Unfortunately, this is the first, so I joined the board in 2016. This is the first year that I've been a part of the board where the budget has been these circumstances, so it's exceedingly difficult for everyone. I do believe that the team that has been working on this have tried to find every possible way to reduce the budget while remaining as staff and program strong as possible. I think, I continue to believe we have to vote at least at the 2%, because if we don't do that, the cuts we have to make would be all the more significant. I think we have to see what the district thinks it'll take to close the $3.3 million gap, and then at least think about, do we try to go out above? It's a weighing of options, right?
Yes.
If we feel like that's too drastic, we try to go above. I think that might put a burden on our community that would be difficult, and I'd be concerned about that. So I continue to think the 2% is the right place to be, and the other proposed gap closing options that are reflected in the presentation, I believe, are reasonable. So, my direction as a board member would be that we look with as much care and diligence as possible at what reductions would have the least amount of impact on our staff, on our students, on our programs, but recognize that we have to find a way to close this gap.
I think just building upon that, that's one of the things that my team is already starting to look at, is we have to look at enrollment. We have to look at how we offer some things. We have to look at our programs that are showing enrollment coming down over time. I don't think personally you'll see a lot except enrollment at the elementaries, just because of the fact we're at 2021, so we can't go above 23. So we have to look at we may have to look at how we offer certain classes. If a class has 6 to 9, we may have to offer it once every 2 semesters instead of every semester. So we are going to try to always do that first before we actually look at reducing individuals. But I can tell you, we're already looking at that, and it's going to be a challenge no matter what. Then we have to look at where are we potentially, I can't say overstaffed, but have staff to be able to sufficiently cover, first and foremost, a mandated program, second, an enriched program, and third, our full program. In our initial, we think we can probably keep a good portion of our full program, but there may be some tweaks at certain levels of how we offer it. This is not going to not touch almost every level of this district, period. It's not going to be borne by just one faction. It's all factions. Differently for some. I can tell you, it may not hit maintenance and custodial as hard as it may hit others. Reason being is we've never really recovered from maintenance and custodial. It probably won't hit transportation as difficult because we still have to transport the same number of students. Now, I will tell you, if we can't close the budget, it's going to affect transportation, because this district will go to a 3-mile, 2-mile radius, and you will have to change your policy, because that's the only way you're going to close a contingent budget gap. That's the hard part. If you go below the 2%, you may have to consider that. I don't think this community wants that. I don't believe the community will want anything we're going to propose, but we have to balance it. The question is we could put up this, here's dreaming. We could put up the whole budget and say, hey, we're going to challenge. I'm not saying this, but I'm sure people might pat me on the back and say, I'm surprised you said that. Right now we're at 14.5, right? Just to get the 6 million. So we would have to, $9 million divided by 2 is what? 4.5 million, 4.5%. I'm sorry, I'm doing Douglas math right now and I can't calculate. They know what I'm talking about.
Be like 21.
I believe to cover everything, not cut anything, not do any of the work that we did, it's a 25% tax levy increase. I do not believe this community will say, oh, let's just do it. You've already shown, first of all, if I was them, I'd say, you've already shown me $3.2 million that you can reduce, so reduce that, and maybe I'll consider the other. Right? But then I'd have to do that Douglas math and figure that out, but that 3.2 million is about 1.5%, so now you're down to about 22% tax levy. Well, on a tax rate, what's 20% of the tax rate? It's 16 or $1.60 times 2, $3.20. So our tax rate, hypothetically, Douglas math, will go from 1638 to 1958. And guess what? That's still lower than any of our colleagues. But you keep everything you have up until now. You see what I'm saying? That's a very big risk.
I have a couple of questions.
Sure.
Maybe a couple of comments. I know that our districts and our GSD BOCES consortium are facing many of the same things. Are they doing anything unique that you have been able to glean from them as a collective pack? That's one thought.
Let me answer that real quick if I can, so you can pose your next one. I do not believe all of them are in that situation. I know Corning is, I know Watkins is, I know Waverly is. I have a strong idea that maybe Addison is, maybe Jasper Truthworth, but not many are in that the same situation as us because they have defined healthcare plans and different healthcare plans. But they are in a different situation. Hammondsport is definitely even in worse situation than us, and I don't mean this, I'm just talking because I know their situation. They're short $1.1 million. They only have $12 million in their budget. Okay, and that's all because the state is not going to give them their safe, harmless money, which I do believe the state is going to put that back in budget negotiations. I believe that the governor is holding all education aid, no matter what, hostage unless she gets $4.5 billion for a housing initiative that she was spurned on last year and she's dug her heels in. And that's nothing against her. That's the way they negotiate, 3 people in a room. So I believe those districts are worried that they may get it back this year and then they've got a plan for that reduction next year because it's coming back. Our problem is we're on the foundation aid side and they'll sacrifice foundation aid for that safe harmless because that safe harmless hits 380 districts across the state. The foundation aid hits the other 320, but it hits them less because they're already getting some aid. So their notion is if we take care of them, they won't worry about the other.
Okay, so nothing that we've been able to glean off of yet.
No, we're all doing the same things.
So I would also like to address our HTA that's in the audience today and welcome you and say thank you for being here. Obviously, if you're here, it means a lot, right? And I think every one of our unions is concerned and alarmed and worried. You know, what can we do collectively as a district, right? As administrators, as board members, and as staff, what can we do? You know, have we talked with our unions and seen?
The district has had full union membership meetings at least twice over the past 8 weeks. One as late as yesterday. We talked to them about this and we also shared how do we address this as we close the gap. And we work collaboratively on trying to make sure that we are as personal and human as possible to work together for the benefit of all. And wherever there are effects, trying to make sure that we minimize those effects if it's on a person.
Right. So I'm going to be really unpopular for a minute. Love you guys, sorry. You know, we just went through at County incorporated something really difficult in the past couple of years, right? We had to be creative in how we attempted to save staffing, okay? And part of that attempt was to reduce, well, we actually went a full year without a pay increase. Not saying that that's what I want to do, right? I know, not that I want to do that, but there was give and take, right? So there were some of us that agreed to, you know, a % decrease of our regular salary, some that were able to. There were some that forego X, Y, and Z. Some of it was a choice, right? So we had options that were presented to us as far as salary, compensation, benefit packages, and we were proposed with options like A and B. If you do this, then you will get this at a later time. If you're not in the position to do that because of your own financial information, then you don't do that. But, and this would be not just obviously teachers that I would be discussing this with, this would be us in total, right? So is that anything that there's any kind of leeway or conversations that can be held in that arena?
The only thing I can say is that's a very difficult discussion to have.
I know, and
With
we know that contracts just, you know, all got signed.
And they're fair contracts.
Right,
Yeah.
right. And that's not what I'm saying. I'm just trying to brainstorm because we're hearing the reasons why, right? We're hearing the reasons why this is happening. But as a board, we're challenged with how do we try to fix this in an equitable way across everything. Everything's got, in my opinion, this is my opinion, everything's got to give somehow. Not that we want to if you can't, right? So I'm just trying to flesh out what kind of conversations have been had, what can be had, what kind of leeway is there, if there is any, because it's important, you know, and if we want to maintain the staff that we have and have people maintain positions, then how can we do that? And we have to have these hard conversations. We have to talk about these things. And we have to see what kind of conversations and ideas come from the folks that are going to be impacted from this. So.
No, I think all valid points. I can say that as the presidents and their associations are either hearing it tonight, they have heard that statement and discussion, but it's not necessarily going anywhere fast because it is a very big challenge. This isn't the situation back in 2011-12, and there are enrollment declines that have leveled off, but there is right sizing that could potentially happen, so that even makes it harder. But I'll be certain to pose it to them again if that's what the board would like me to do.
But I'm not just saying one group.
No, I do everything. Look I've met with every group openly. They've been wonderful. They're trying to be part of the solution. And I can't ask for a better group of labor leaders that have come in. We even asked, is there anything we're missing? Is there anything you want to know? We've opened questions. And we're having individual meetings with each of the leaderships over the next couple of days to try to give them the idea of the impact and see if, and we'll ask them those last questions as well.
You know, what ideas do you folks have to save positions, be equitable, be fair to you with the hard work that you do, you know, and try to do the best for everybody. There's no easy answer, you know, and I really appreciate you being here tonight in solidarity. It means a lot. It shows that you care. So thank you for coming out.
Thank you for
So a couple of things. Yeah, the hard part with a private sector, public sector analogy is just that there's a lot of economic pressures on Corning Inc. That are not present in the school system. They're not mandated to make class or anything else. They go to the free economic opportunity, whereas we as a school district, we're mandated to education, and we also have all sorts of other mandates. And so there's not those economic pressures that come to bear. We can't close.
Oh, I get
We
that.
can't move our
I'm just
business.
saying, I've seen creative problem solving, if can be, and what can be applicable in one arena, can it be applicable to others? Thanks. You know, what can be utilized across the realm, right? Not saying that what they did was perfect. Sorry.
Right. I'll just say from a public sector HR perspective in school districts and education that when we as management come to the table, or when the unions come to the table, this scenario is in the back of their mind. Right? They never want to agree to an agreement that's not feasible. That they know that we're one economic downturn away from having to cut 10 to 20% of the staff. And so I think both parties come to the table in good faith and agree, like, these are the rates that we're going to pay. And I'll just say, in my opinion, it does become a little unfair to the associations then to say you have to make a concession. And I've actually, obtained some concessions in my time, but they were minimal. In really the big picture, they didn't really affect the budget because, like I said before, 75% of your cost is the people in the room, people on the bus, the people serving food. So it's just it's a very different economic model, and I think it's hard for the public to understand that. And I think the best thing to do, the district can do, is what they've been doing: look for places they can cut in the existing budget. Possibly right-sizing staff within reason, while still keeping our program strong, and just live. We're going to have to live with some of these consequences, unfortunately, that will probably mean less staff. But I'm not saying that every stone's been unturned, and certainly the associations in the district can probably brainstorm a couple other things. But unfortunately, in my experience, there's not enough savings when you're talking about these kind of gaps to do anything really significant.
It's worthy of conversation though. I don't want for the public that may be watching to say, has the board considered this? Has the board had conversation about this? And, I think it's fair to have that conversation, right? To at least say that we've talked about these things. I just learned something from what we shared, and I appreciate that, But I think it's fair to we have to look at everything, when we're trying to make decisions. And I appreciate that, especially being new and never being through this budget process before. And I know Dan said he's never been through, something as unfortunate as this. So to have these conversations is crucial.
I think Katrina was next.
Well, I had one last thing.
Oh, okay, sorry.
I wanted to endorse Mr. Christmas's approach of we have two opportunities, but I think we ought to give the public the best opportunity to support the existing programs to the greatest potential. So let's go with the full tax levy limit. I would also endorse maybe a little bit more use of the fund balance to reduce the gap.
We have to be a very,
Yeah, I understand.
I will say, you and I would love to do that, but she's the one that's going to beat me up.
All I'm saying is I'm open to it. I'm not
I understand.
I'm not taking a position that millions it and everything else has to come through a cut.
I will tell you, I only thought it was going to be 1.5, and she came up with the extra 2, so I'll be kind. She did that, and I'm grateful. I wish there was more, but I know she's trying to make sure we have a plan for the out years too. Katrina? Okay.
Maybe, go ahead, Liz. Two things. I support Dan's sticking with going out of the 2 and possibly looking at more. Can we take a sharp right turn and play a game?
No.
No, I promise. So has our community supported a budget that challenged the tax cap?
This district has never challenged the tax cap. Every budget that we've put up has been passed with a supermajority. But, and I'm the only superintendent in this area that has passed the challenge cap in the first year in Albany under the eyes of Andrew Cuomo in the first year. The only way you really challenge is you have to make significant cuts and the community comes out and says, that's enough. Pass what you have to pass. We're not hearing that yet, but I think we may hear it between the next two meetings. And that's going to, I mean, honestly, we're going to fill that gap. When you see what it takes to fill that gap, administratively, instructionally, support staff-wise, operation-wise, you won't like it. Nobody will. But we must. And we must pass a budget. This is the biggest thing. If the budget does not pass at 2%, the community is going to say, we expect you to cut more. That's, how would you say, that's the hard part. In my past boards, when, like in Bethlehem, my past board, when they challenged it, they had a $12.5 million gap. So this isn't something that I like doing. I had to do that in 6 weeks when I first arrived there. But the whole point is sooner or later, the community came out. The collective bargaining agreements, they were great too. They even said, we will pass this. Please forgive me, how the heck am I supposed to believe that? I'm only been there 6 weeks. They only challenged it by 1%. They went from 3.5 to 4.5. But their 1% was $1 million. 10,500 people came out and voted that day. 79% passed it. And it was nonstop and it was all over the news. That year, 16 budgets went up, 13 passed. All of them, please forgive me for using this verbal analogy, but it was said. All of them had sort of blood in the water, and that's why people said, this is enough. We don't want this to happen to our school, our community. Right now, we're not hearing anything. I will hear something from my staff, but I expect to, and honestly, it's not that I haven't heard anything, because we've already been talking for the past 6 weeks. And they know the seriousness of it, but they also know we've tried to say we're going to try to minimize it as best we can. So I can only say I don't believe they're leaving a stone unturned. I don't believe we are. And that's the hard part. But we've got to get to the next step before we're really here.
I will say with the stone unturned, I want to give your team kudos. On Monday at our ad hoc meeting, they were sitting next to me with calculators and finding pennies and trying to, it was amazing to see. I might have been eavesdropping a little bit, guys, sorry. It was really, like, they were going line by line. Oh, I found some. So I appreciated seeing that little peek behind the curtain.
Thank you.
I think Ward wants to.
Oh, I feel bad. Go ahead.
I don't want to block the
Here, Warren,
information.
I want to make sure everybody can hear you.
So, I want to organize the sequence. So, I agree with all of those that have said we should go out at the 2% and see where that takes us. I would be open to using ERS funds, a portion of those funds. I would be open to using a portion of the fund balance. I also would be open to a discussion about our healthcare consultant, because they have serious concerns with the presentation of the inflation. I thought that's why we hired those folks, to give us advanced knowledge, and if they didn't meet their obligations, or I misunderstood what the purpose of employing them was, then I need to be corrected. But if they didn't give us information to say, you should expect this amount of increase in health care, then I'm not sure why we're paying them. So maybe that's a discussion in your meetings. And then I also think you've captured all of the historically low fruit in education. And now, to me, we're spinning our wheels just saying we gotta close the gap. You seemingly have a plan in place or ideas, and you don't want to tell us tonight because you want to meet with whoever may be impacted. And therefore, to me, you should have those meetings. And we're meeting next
Thursday.
April 4th, right? And that's when the real discussions about what we want to do or not. Right now, I can read there's a $3.3 million gap. You said you have a plan, but you don't want to let us know. And I'm repeating myself now. You don't want to let us know what that plan is until you talk to people, and I respect that. I think people should know and not be told in a budget meeting like that. So I would be in favor of moving forward in the sense, unless there's any closing questions on what we've been presented tonight. And then I would also suggest that maybe we short circuit some of our introductory comments in these presentations, so next time we can get to the hard discussion of what has to happen.
We'll cover them real brief.
I think we've seen a lot of the early stuff now, so at least it's embedded in my mind, I know that, so that, those are my thoughts.
We sort of kick a dead horse with no problem. Sorry to fun with horses, but, these presentations, we have to do it because we don't know who's watching. People do go to our website. We do spend a lot of time in each one. We get more information and we add. But now we're at the discussion phase, so we will go much quicker on the openings and so forth. And I do think you reflected that correctly, is we do have a plan that we just started to finalize this afternoon at 4 o'clock when we finish this presentation. We have talked to our union leaderships, and we've all agreed that we need to make this more personal as much as possible, instead of, how would you say, in some situations it becomes a sterile discussion. That these are face-to-face discussions in helping people understand what's going on. For some it will come as a complete surprise. For some, after tonight, some people will say, oh, I know exactly what he may be talking about. But we owe them the respect and professionalism to have those discussions. And I think our union leaderships, whether they're here tonight or not, have all participated. We've come up with the same ideal of how we're going to handle it, which it was not handled that way earlier. It was more notification by letter. And we will have a letter as we talk, but it's more about our individual conversations to help people understand that you are part of our family. We feel the same. It may not feel the same way. I was impacted in like this when I first started teaching twice, and I've had to go through it. Other members in this staff have probably gone through it. I know some of them that we've rehired through preferential lists. All of those things are going to be explained. The good part, if there is a silver lining, is we do have a lot of colleagues in a lot of school districts that are also looking for positions that we're fortunate enough to fill. And we're going to try to lean on each other to take care of our family.
Thank you. So you had said one of your colleagues had to cut 88 positions. Where was that and what was
I'm not going to talk about another district, I'm just referencing that in this area that was announced earlier last week.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
So to kind of go off of what Aaron was saying in the creative thinking, I think that's why I'm looking for more specific, because like Warren said, we've seen the same slides. And it's the same information, but it's very generalized. So to be able to just get a little bit more information on, you know, the technology pieces, we spend this much on these types of, you know, you were saying, I don't know how much that security system is costing us. I don't know how much the Traversa is costing us. I don't know how much a lot of these things are. But if, you know, the teaching staff is saying, we can't live without this, and then if everybody all comes together to the table to talk collaboratively about their needs for those things, I guess I'd like to hear it from the people on what they really, well, maybe not the people, but I'd also like to, maybe if that's what they do, to come to talk, I'd like to hear from people. But that's not to undercut anything that you guys are doing. I'm just saying I like to have as much knowledge as possible and to try to get creative in other areas of how do we really start to do this, because I'm guessing that not just this year, but some of the cuts that we've made are things that we're going to see increases in next year. So maybe it's having to change policy, maybe it's looking at how are we going to do things overall, because you were saying something about like the busing system, okay, we're going to have to cut, you know, if we went down to cutting that, well, you know, even if we did that for this year per se, you still don't really get that much of savings, because in the future, Center Street's one of the more centrally located one, you're busing further away, so you would lose because you're still gonna have to be in that 3 mile gap. Do you see what I mean? Like you would have those people, because with the consolidation, depending on how district lines are drawn, you're still gonna have to try to come up with, you might not really save there. So I guess I'm also trying to get an idea of not just this year, but thinking about even future things. What do we want to have our programs look like, you know? But I guess that's my big thing. And I don't know if I always explain myself as well as I should, or as well as I would like to be understood. But I think itemizations are good. Like for the first time today, I don't know, I think I'd asked once before about how much, you know, maybe understanding like the modified, having that program too. It's a great program, but I know we also talked about wanting to have like intramurals and wanting to have extra things for kids and like the extracurriculars, like okay, like some of the clubs you were saying have holes or whatever, but just to have more understanding of it, then you can see a little bit more and make bigger picture ideas. Do you know what I mean? Because
We do
it is.
We do it every day, that's why. I mean,
Yeah,
we come from a different,
if you get sheets
yeah.
and you're looking at them, you know, it'd be good
But
to be
just
able
so
to
that you
see.
know, we do it every day. And if you get complaints, we address it. The hard part is micromanaging of the budget, which is your responsibility to look. That's why you get the monthly updates every month and the board approves them every month. So you have all that information, but you don't get into this code down to this item by this building and that's what you're asking for, and that's not going to be able to be feasible.
No, that's not what I'm saying. I mean,
Okay.
I guess I did have in the last meeting, there was a line, but I didn't get to ask it. It was like $89,000 and that was on legal. And I didn't know if that's like what we pay as a retainer.
That's what we pay as a retainer for legal, and it goes up and down depending on the requests we get from either special education, either outside agencies, lawsuits from families that choose to sue us, in addition to advisement, board questions, and everything else. That is an obligation that we must maintain a legal.
Right.
Yeah.
So I guess, you know, maybe I would say, you know, going back to some of the appointments that we did, if there's some things that we as a board could look at instead of just legal looking at it, if that saves us some money on the legal end, then maybe that's just,
The board cannot provide itself legal
I mean, like
advice.
for appointments, I mean, if there's appointment things, like if there's things that we could review that maybe other people are reviewing right now, if that ends up being an
I
expenditure,
don't understand what you mean.
I don't know, because I don't know enough about all the different things in, when we did all of our appointments.
Oh, you mean like at the organizational
like an
meeting?
organizational meeting, like I'm just, or, okay, so we had some line items for the board in the last budget, and I don't remember them off the top of my head, but there was like maybe a line for like 11,000.
Yeah, that was for NISBA.
Is that our annual renewal, is that what we?
That's your
paid for that?
membership fee only.
That's our membership fee.
Yep, and
So
that's
I guess
probably,
looking
I
at
hate
it-
to say it, just so that you know, we haven't proposed that, but you're going to see that next week. And that's an easy, low-hanging fruit. We will not recommend joining NISBA, RSA, or the financial consortium next year. The reason being, and just so I'm not trying to surprise anybody, the reason being is I'd rather get rid of $14,000, $15,000 there, rely on our legal, rely on our board, rely on our local, to try to minimize, and that's what my team's been doing. We do it every single day, pretty much nonstop from February. Honestly, I know Katie and Ann do it every single day, pretty much from November until tonight, and then we'll continue. And then if the budget's approved, we get a little respite, and then just about a couple weeks, and then they go into auditing. And then once they get through auditing, pretty much the only time they have as a respite, if anything, is from the middle of September to the end of October, and then it all starts over again. So, I mean, if the board wishes to do that, and this is frustration right now, I'm going to say to the board, if the board wishes to regularly do that, I don't need all of them. And I just need to know, because I don't mean that callously, but that's what they do. That's what I do. And we do a damn good job.
Okay, yeah, I wasn't asking those questions in
I know.
sort of an attacking manner. I'm just trying to get information, and I really am sorry that you take it there, because that's not how I'm meaning it at all in any way. I'm brand new. I'm trying to gather information, and that's why I was trying to ask some of those questions, like you said, okay, we
And
don't
we'll answer.
go,
We
we
have no
don't go
problem.
to NISBA, or renew with NISBA. I'm just trying to be, like Aaron was suggesting, we're all in this together, so let's all get creative and be able to have as much information as possible with what expenditures might look like, because maybe collectively we say, you know, we haven't had that one RAS system for a long time for making sure that we scan people's IDs, and we do have a really, you know, the doors lock and our secretaries are able to answer the door. Maybe that's where we see that we could make a cut, or, you know, we'd really love to have Traversa. And I'm only picking these things because these are some of the things that kind of like we've discussed or we have right now.
They're on your minds.
Or they're newer things that have been additions, you know. Maybe we say, okay, Traversa is something that we would love to have, but we operated before without it, so maybe that's something we can, and I don't know how many of those things there are. So that's why I'm looking for, you know, not like super detailed, down to like the toilet paper and the pencils and the, you know, paper clips and like what each teacher gets in the classroom and how they spend their money. I'm not looking for any of that. I'm looking for like more broad, not quite as general as the presentations we've been given, but maybe just a step broken down from there of these are some of the big things and how can they be twisted, just more money-wise to be able to see that. That's all.
I understand that.
I think it would just help
Yeah.
to
And
understand things.
I hope you understand, Katrina, I'm not trying to be defensive, but this is starting to wear on my whole team, me, myself. I'm about to disappoint people I swear to try to defend and for the board. And that if my team can find something to reduce that we don't need for operational, I know they're doing that. That's the hard part. Do you think I want to come in here and say we need to get rid of our SRO program? I don't. But you know what? We're probably going to have to talk about it. Because 6 years ago, or 10 years ago when I came in, we had one officer, we have 7 now. Things have changed. But different districts are having to make those choices. And I personally don't want to put it in front of you and say, hey, do it, but guess what? I have to look at that as I balance the whole thing, and that's what my team is doing. And I think that's what the board's sort of challenged us with and entrusted us with. So I'm not trying to be defensive, I'm trying to say, board, tell me what you want to do, because I can't just do just because you ask it, the board has to tell me.
Liz?
Katrina, for order of operations, this might help, because I had similar questions, looking for details. So correct me if I'm wrong, please, but the team will look at the mandated things that we have to do. We have no choice. These are the things we cannot live without. Then, at our next couple meetings, we're going to get, okay, this is what we have to keep, and these are the options we could save if we took this out or if we took this out. And to steal Warren's, I'm going to call it your famous line because it was a great line, some horse trading and some debate, and we'll decide as a group. We get to make those decisions. But where we don't have power as a board is in the basics, in the things that Tom is talking about. But we will have a choice. We will be able to advocate for the district in a deeper way that's not exactly line by line, but really does allow us to debate and discuss on a deeper level. We had to get through this part first, and then we get more detailed.
I'm just gonna pick some words. Doug, trust. Aaron, creativity. Dr. Douglas, your team and the knowledge that they provide. Warren, sequential. I think all of these things are going on. Oops, I forgot one. Respect. You have some ideas, but you don't want to share them yet here because you want to take them to the people that are going to be involved first. That shows respect. I think we have a lot of good things going on, and I guess maybe the best one, excuse me, is trust. And I trust in your team. I've been doing this for a long time, and I know that your main goal is to keep within the district the very best of everything we can have. And you people have the knowledge to bring to us next time, okay, we've looked here, let's talk about this. So trust, creativity, respect, knowledge. Thank you.
All right, so I think you've all had an opportunity to speak. If you have any closing slides, like when the next meeting is, something important that we need to.
Yep. I have basically a little final summation, then get right to that. No matter what, these are difficult discussions. I don't believe it's any surprise to anyone here in this room over the past 8 weeks that we are facing a difficult budget season. We are watching our neighboring districts, we are watching state districts being in the same boat, better or worse, but no matter what, all will get there sooner or later in the fashion that we are set up within New York State. You know, we were looking at a preliminary budget gap of $15.3 million in February with the help of phenomenal staff, our unions, our leadership, our administrators. In addition, the board's support for the 2% levy limit and hopefully additional state aid, we've been able to reduce that gap down to roughly $3.3 million with reserves and fund balance. This isn't easy, and I appreciate what everybody's made, their comments, their positions, their questions. I also appreciate everyone being out here tonight, and I know that even though if they're not here, more people are paying attention, especially tonight on our video, and we appreciate that. Hopefully the stream has not had a problem like it did last time. The hardest part about this job is it's our public duty to be educational and operational sound. It is why we are taking a balanced approach as we evaluate every expense while also trying to continue to uphold a strong program we offer for our students and for our Horsehead Central School District. Administrators, union leadership, Board of Education, I know we are all continuing trying to balance the budget. However, as you've heard, we've cut pretty much most of the extras without impacting people or programming, and even this will still have ripple effects. Now we go forward as tonight's budget meeting, and we must navigate very difficult decisions out of respect, professionalism, and dignity, and support for our staff and programmatic potential reductions. We will try to keep the latter at a minimum as much as possible, or at least minimum impacts. These decisions, as you all know, are not easy on any of us. My team, myself with some 38 years of experience, and the Raider Nation family. No leader, no administrator ever wants to be in a position, because we recognize the value of each and every member of this school district and our community. Our team will be looking at these personnel cuts very diligently and as efficiently and effectively as possible to try to minimize program impacts. But this is our day-to-day lives, and we must try to live them to the best and do the best by our students, while also acknowledging that no matter what, this will have an impact on our staff. I hope you join me as over the next week we try to offer support, respect, dignity, and help for anyone that may be affected by any potential recommendations we will bring to the board. I do believe, as Mr. Conklin said earlier, that once we have our next meeting, those recommendations will zero out as best possible the budget, and the board will actually have to have, at that point, the discussion of whether or not they wish to advocate for something, accept our recommendations, consider a challenge, or suggest something else that they would like to reduce in lieu of something else. But I think once you see our potential reductions, I would hope that the board would say that we have tried to be fair and as balanced, and we can't use the word equitable, but we're trying to look at everything and make sure that we are operationally sound and as programmatically strong as possible, versus our past statements of staff strong and program strong as long as possible. It is with great sorrow that I have to say that we can no longer say as staff strong and program strong as possible for the time being. And then, no matter what, I have every confidence this board and community will rise to the challenge and rebuild. Just like the people that are here tonight, and the people watching, and the board members that you have all been. So I want to thank you all for your dedication and your thoughts as we travel this path together. Our future board meeting is Thursday, April 4th here at Multimedia Center at 6 p.m. That is a budget meeting. It's not a regular scheduled meeting. Thursday 11th is another budget meeting. That's not a regular scheduled meeting, but we added these because of the difficult challenges. That is really, on April 11th, our final budget. We need to know our direction at that point so that we can prepare for a budget adoption on the 18th, as that is the date we must do it, and then perform a public hearing on May 9th. And the budget vote, I think, is May 21st. Yes, May 21st, all day here at the high school. Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes our presentation.
Okay, I'd like to thank all those that participated in the presentation. I'd also like to thank all staff that came out tonight. I know for many in the district, tomorrow is their last work day, and then they have a week off, so I hope you either get time with family, time with, what?